besides God with the capital G, we have to think ourselves into godhood. Oh, I just got some kind of message. Um, it went away before I could read it. But anyway, um, so the rest of us, we have to think ourselves into godhood. And I would guess that probably most people who do reach that level somewhere between the ages of 20 and 50. It can happen before at the age 20 and after age 50, but probably the majority make that level between ages 20 and age 50. But I just mean the majority of those who make the level, and most people don't. So that brings us to this being represented by the third apocalyptic horse, and that horse, or horseman, I should say. So that was a black horse, and its rider had in his hands a set of balances and old-fashioned scale, and went out saying, a measure of wheat for a day's wages, 3 measures of barley for a day's wages. Low ROI, low return on investment. And so anyway, that represents inflation, famine, uh, and but I think the low ROI is really the focal point here, and because it is so hard to think yourself into godhood, very few people do, and that's part of what's meant when it says a measure of wheat for a day's wages and 3 measures of barley for a day's wages. That God is working on humankind, and yet very few people will think themselves into godhood. And there are different levels of godhood, so you're not going to start creating worlds as soon as you think yourself into godhood. And so I don't want to give you any false notions here. I don't want you to think that you're gonna even control the weather. I don't care if your name is Rothschild. You're not gonna control the weather. And so let me be careful not to give you any sort of false notion there. And I may have to make this a two-part video. But let me see, what else did I not cover? Because I'm just talking off the top of my head without even using my notes for the most part. Uh, so, oh yes. So this level of thought is most apparent in dictators. So I believe that pretty much any dictator, especially one that's been a dictator for 3 years or more, that they have thought themselves into what I'll call demigodhood. Their mind has become more organized, developed an 11th zone of thought, and so you don't have to be a dictator though. You can be in any influential position, and you don't even have to be in an influential position in order to think yourself into godhood. But there are other non-dictatorial politicians like Mitch McConnell, or who else was I thinking of? I've been talking without my notes for so long now. Um, but Mitch McConnell, Joe Manchin, so they realize what sort of power they have, and Mitch knows how he can have major sway over the Senate, which has major sway over U.S. policy, mostly domestic, but foreign to some degree as well. And so there's that. Joe Manchin can hold up the budget talks, and he realizes his power. But politicians in general realize how they came to power, and they conceptualize it in this God element. Like I said, each successive part of the mind is an extension of what came before it. So you had the societal concepts, the concepts in nature, and so forth. Uh, that are thought about by that 10th zone of thought, but that zone of thought is still on the receiving end, learning about the world around it, learning how other people think and act, learning how nature functions, learning about the different concepts in the world and universe around them that can affect them in different ways. It can affect them adversely, okay? But once you think yourself into godhood, the polarity reverses, and you yourself are thinking of your concept of life, your concept of society that you're going to project out to others. So you're no longer learning about the concepts at work in your surrounding environment. You're actually developing concepts and projecting them outward. So that's the difference between the 10th and 11th zone of thought in the mind, and I might have to cut things off before I'm completely done. But anyway, let me see, what else have I not mentioned? Um, oh, well, also, entertainers can also become demigods, think themselves into godhood. I mean, consider Dave Chappelle. He's been out there for a while. He's got his concept of life, I'm sure, and I haven't. I'm not one to watch a lot of stand-up comedy. Not that I don't like Dave Chappelle, but I do know that he's said some controversial things about transgender people, and I personally don't give a fuck what he said. I've got thick skin, and I'm not transgender. I'm not LGBTQIA, but I'm none of that. Okay, I'm ERIC, but anyway, so you can be a rapper, you can be a singer, you can be a comedian, someone who is in a role where they're constantly projecting their concept of life upon others, uh, or you can just be like me and not be any of that kind of stuff and still be a deep thinker who uh, decides to project their concept of life upon others. Uh, and so you're not just taking in thoughts about how the world around you works, but you're actually determining how it should work and throwing that back out at people. Um, so let me see what else I haven't said about this particular uh, part of the mind. Um, I think I've oh man, without even really looking at my notes, I covered just about everything. Um, oh yes, so there is one more thing that I'll say before I sign off and start a part two, and that is that I mentioned parallels between brain matter and storm clouds. White matter in the brain, gray clouds, that produce storms, gray matter in the brain that produces physical activity, and black matter, well, black storm clouds that are fierce, and black matter in the brain, something that we haven't really seen in the world, but I have some thoughts on that too. But this other thing that I was referencing earlier is this. Consider the hurricane. Now, what you might not know about a hurricane is that the larger the eye of the storm, well, first of all, the eye is the calmest part of the storm. But the larger the eye is, the weaker the storm is. As that eye shrinks, then the storm actually becomes more intense. And so don't quote me on cause and effect. I'm not saying that the eye shrinking is what makes it more intense. It could be that the increased intensity causes the eye to shrink. Okay, I'm not a stormologist here, but it's a neat parallel that the small eye corresponds with the more fierce storm, whereas the larger eye corresponds with the weaker storm, the weaker hurricane. Okay, and so you have these men who start out with these 10 spears of thought in their mind, and then that 10th spear organizes a little bit further and develops a smaller, more powerful spear inside of it, which is that which makes him a god, demigod. Psalm 82:6, John 10:34. And so as his mind gets further organized and the eye of the storm gets smaller, then he becomes more fierce. And that begins to explain the fierceness of a dictator. But then even those who don't become dictators but have this part of the mind, they can just develop a very fierce way about them. They can't legally go around beheading people. And they can't do all the things that a dictator can do because they don't have that job title, but they have the mindset. And even as the dictator wants to force his ideas on society, his concept of life on society, with the arbitrary rules that he makes, other people find other ways to impose their concept of life on society, especially after they develop godhood, okay, demigodhood, human flesh, powerful mind godhood, not let there be light godhood, okay. And speaking of light, it's been lights out for most people in this area for a little while now, and I'm going to turn out this little light that I have over here, which I've been letting shine, and I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm going to pick up where I left off. All right.